We are here today and we've got a great hot topic to discuss that's going to be presented as a roundtable. So, as everyone enters, we'll do some introductions and get underway. So, thanks everybody for joining. All right, give it a few minutes. Sometimes it's always feels like we need a little music, background music right at this point. So, um, and it's good to, if anyone wants to turn on cameras, that's always encouraged. Again, we love to do this as a more of a roundtable and want to have this be interactive. I know many of us have lots of opportunities to do different types of webinars and learning sessions, and this is one that we really think serves itself well by having it be as interactive as possible. Yeah. Got a question in the chat? All right. Got a little bit after the hour. And so we're going to go ahead and get underway here. So, welcome everyone. I'm Beth White. I'm the founder and CEO of MeBeBot. And we've been hosting nearly monthly roundtable sessions where we invite other thought leaders from our industry to join us on these discussions where we talk about topics that are very prominent and perhaps even underserved, where we believe there needs to be more discussion because there's a lot of curiosity and potentially even confusion, and folks are looking for clarity. And so we're here to kind of bring together not only ourselves to talk about this topic, but also to have participation from you all. And so as we go through here, cameras are encouraged if you'd like to join with your camera on. Chatting is also, being active in the chat is welcomed. And we're going to get underway here in just a moment. We will be recording this session as well, and there'll be a replay available for everyone on our website by Friday. So thanks all for joining. But first of all, I have the pleasure of having Mindy Honkoop and Lindsay Harwell here to join me today. And so I thought we would do introductions first. So I'll just kind of do a brief intro and then turn it over to Mindy and then Lindsay. I started MeBeBot 8 years ago as one of the early native AI solutions to really help think through how can we elevate and change the employee experience and use AI as a front end to help support people with inside companies, but also the teams that within HR and IT and operations that tend to be bogged down in a lot of administrative work. So we do a lot of work around employee support, communications, engagement, and workflow efficiencies. And so we also lend ourselves out there to help with AI consulting services as well as trainings. So if that is of a need your organization has, don't hesitate to reach out. And with me today, Mindy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, such a pleasure to be here. I am Mindy Honkoop, and I am the VP of Customer Success at MeBeBot. I was a recovering Chief People Officer, and as I was looking for what opportunities were out there for me next, MeBeBot presented itself, and I also was a fractional HR executive, and I actually had the opportunity to be a customer of MeBeBot and be able to see it in action, and just really fell in love. And when the opportunity came to kind of work with Beth as a VP of customer success, I couldn't say no. So I get the joy of being able to do all the things Beth just said alongside of her, support our customers, often working with their HR leaders and team members to really think through how to leverage MeBeBot in alignment with their AI workplace strategy. So it's a joy to be here. Thanks, Beth.
Oh, glad to have you, Mindy. And Lindsay.
Yes, hi. Thanks, Beth. My name is Lindsay Harwell. I'm in the Austin, Texas area. I am the creator and host of the Reclaimed podcast. So that's something that's fairly new that I've launched. But my professional background is in human resources and specifically focusing on key strategies around people and people initiatives.
And it's great. I had the opportunity to meet Lindsay and see Mindy on stage at Disrupt HR Austin recently. And we had this whole session here today kind of stemmed out of our discussion at that event because
Yeah.
we were talking about, where the problems are with inside organizations for how AI is being thought about, how people are learning AI technology and skills and putting it into their day-to-day lives, but really where some things are kind of stuck and perhaps even backwards. And so that's what we're going to kind of jump into here today. So it's fun when you can have organic conversations in person that lead to this event here. We're
Mm.
not going to bore you with a ton of slides, but I'm going to show you one more resource slide. And again, these slides can be available to you as well afterwards. Feel free to share your email. We can send these out. We'll have a recording as well. But we have lots of resources on our site. One thing we do believe in is ethical AI and responsible AI usage. So we host a group called Ethical AI for HR. I think Amy's going to drop in some of these links into the chat so you all have references to these. But as we go through the discussion today, we're probably going to also reference an AI employee usage policy, how to calculate ROI on AI, and our clarity framework that we put together for a previous roundtable we hosted in March timeframe. So those are just some resources that are being dropped into the chat right now. But let's get underway, and we're again going to go toggle between showing a slide and having a bit of a discussion. But kind of here's one of the first places we wanted to start. And I know this is a hot topic in organizations is anxiety. What's happening out here? Here's some of the current stats that are happening. Right now, I think the heightened anxiety around AI is obviously a lot of fear for people's jobs. AI is being rolled out real quickly. Look at the $301 billion spending with inside organizations, but yet strategies are really immature within organizations, and many leaders are not sure or may not know how to reimagine the work that's happening out there with inside their organizations. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and invite Mindy and Lindsay to talk about like this anxiety that's growing in companies and what's happening and what we're hearing in organizations today. Lindsay, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I think, within organizations, but also it's the topic of conversation just in general, right? Among
Mm-hmm.
peers and folks you're working with, and even in your personal life, it's just such a topic of conversation. And I think what's driving the fear is we see around us a lot of layoffs, a lot of restructuring that's happening as AI sort of comes to be within organizations. We see the spend, as you just showed on your slide, right? We're spending money on these tools and these resources. And I think part of that justification of the tools is, as we look at our whole P&L, what are we spending on people versus what are we spending on tools? And how do we sort of justify both spends? I think the other piece that's creating a lot of uncertainty is just not knowing where this is going to go. What's the end state? What can we expect? What should we be doing with our own skill sets? And, how are we supposed to be learning this? And I know we're going to get into a lot of these specific topics today, but that uncertainty of we see what's happening today in the moment, and it creates fear because we actually don't know where we're supposed to go. We don't have a path forward. And without some clarity of path forward and how we can arm ourselves with the right skills and tools and capabilities, it becomes a very scary situation for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mindy, what would you like to add to that?
I was just gonna say yes, and because I think from the shift that I've seen from last year to this year, last year we still saw a lot of hesitation to start playing in, especially with the HR professional is in conversations. This year, people are playing and experimenting, but it's often at the individual level, and often there's lack of clarity around, okay, how what is next after the play. Like, and how do I line the play with actual business outcomes? And so there's this, level of, if there is some of this play is also behind the scenes, right? It's because it's individuals playing on their own
Mm-hmm.
because they may not be clear of how to safely do that in organizations. So there's still like room also for governance because there is this sense of people's desire and they know that if I don't understand how to utilize this that I will be left behind. And so I definitely know and sense that people are experimenting, but it is now, okay, now what? Which is really going back to what Lindsay said. I don't want to just reiterate what she said, but also in the comments, I'm really sensing that's where our audience is as well. It's really about how do we move from experimentation to an actual system, ecosystem thinking of AI.
I think you make a really great point. Oops, sorry here, folks. Is we're talking about like the you brought up a little bit of the feelings, of
Yeah.
where people were at last year to this year. I love that you were using the word play, Mindy, because
Mhm.
it did feel very playful when everyone was getting started. But now is it more of like the rubber's meeting the road and
Mhm.
people are now having to like really go, oh wow, now this isn't just for fun. We're now making this happen. And
Yeah.
so this is where they start to see perhaps that their role is going to be changing,
Yeah.
right? And that, AI is being encouraged to use. I'm kind of curious if people want to put it in the chat. Is anyone measuring success by how many tokens your team is using? I know that's being talked about as a way to measure productivity on using AI. I find it very strange as a productivity measurement, but I mean, that's just it, as people are trying to, even companies aren't sure how to kind of measure this frequency that they want their employees to use AI. But yet, I think the biggest thing is so many feel very underprepared, right? And I think that I'm going to go ahead and kind of skip ahead to one that no, I'll just stay right here. Let's talk about this just a bit more about like this disconnect with we went from play to now we're okay, now go figure out how to use this and what's happening within this AI literacy gap within organizations because we've been asking a lot of our people and what are they truly feeling and if you've got teams that you think are struggling also, if you're on the call and you're like, our team's struggling with this too, we're open to people chiming in here
Yeah.
verbally too. But Lindsay, do you have some thoughts on this as far as, organizations you've been part of or, people that you know within the HR space or IT space
Yeah.
that are challenged with this right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think my first thought is I think part of the anxiety and what's driving that is, quite frankly, we're already behind. I think a lot of organizations didn't prepare for what was coming far enough in advance. And so now the technology is here. Companies are feeling the pressure to adopt and adapt. And employees, I think, are kind of stuck in this middle stage of, yikes, I'm not quite prepared. And so, in terms of ROI and how things are being measured, I actually don't know that we're there yet. I don't know that our infrastructure, our systems, all of the things that we need to do. I mean, strictly thinking from an HR perspective, right? The infrastructure on leveling and org design and job descriptions and skills and capabilities and our total reward systems and how all of that needs to flux and change with the new way of working and the future of how we're going to work. And so I think that some of this is this like a little bit of a pressure cooker right now. And companies are going to need to understand how are we measuring? I mean, even the numbers you flashed up, Beth. I mean, I'd like to know how are we defining that? How are we even
Yes.
defining the response to the survey? Is it mouse clicks? Is it token utilization? Or is it actual like changes in the way that we work and productivity from new ways of working? And I would venture to say, just based on my network, people I've spoken to, I came out of a UT program recently with a lot of women, so I had a great chance to pick people's brains there. Um, there's just a lack of like, how do we measure if we're being successful as a company, but as an employee? And also the differentiation between AI enablement for clients and customers and the products we offer versus AI enablement internally. And I do think we're doing one better than the other at this point.
Yeah. And, I think the success measures are so important about, if we, and this is where we talk about like, how do we start to have the open dialogues with our employees around, okay, we are still figuring this out. And how, if we do have success measures, what are those actually? Because in the lack of conversation, in the lack of clarity, our employees are probably are I know building a story or a narrative of what they believe those success measures are, and it's not often that the organization has even identified what those are, but they may be seeing how other companies, where you see the news headlines of where layoffs are being determined by AI literacy of employees, which may translate for others that, oh, maybe it's about the AI usage. I mean, there's just an article that came out the other day about how Amazon employees admit to using AI unnecessarily to pump up internal usage scores because they believed that is how the company was, you know, using usage targets as a success measure. And so they are actually inflating the AI token usage, which is a cost to the
Right.
organization. And so there is, a lot of need around how do we even speak with our employees about, where we're at. And if we don't have measures, let's be honest about that and
Well,
even speaking
and
into that.
for sure. And I think it's a matter of, this whole conversation is about the literacy. What is the
Yes.
literacy? People really understanding how AI works, what it is,
Yeah.
how they can use it. I mean, AI is a huge facet of technology, and we give people very simple tools to access the power of AI, yet there's so little really understood about how the tools work. So how can you even set outcomes without making sure the literacy is there?
Exactly, Beth.
And so if we share just another stat, we like these statistics here. It's kind of like what's really, kind of harming is, the strategy is all great, but unless people have the AI literacy, they're not going to know where they fit into this strategy. And frankly, the lack of adoption is because people are going to be like, but I don't even know how to use it, right? But there's even other bigger barriers that come before that. Is how many of you have heard the term shadow AI, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we've heard about that where employees were using it, having it on their phone, ChatGPT, or bringing a second computer into their workspace where they could actually run a type of generative AI program because the company didn't do this AI privacy policy or governance policy or safe usage policy. There was no education about it. So still today, there's many companies that are citing this as one of the main barriers is they just haven't even gotten together as a leadership team
Yeah.
to set the tone of what you can and cannot use within the workplace. And especially it gets very complex, and we're going to talk about that when you have a lot of tools that have been in existence within your organization and now you're flipping on some AI components in it that haven't really even been evaluated or
Mm.
understood. So that's been a barrier. The other thing about this slide, and again, this is based on a survey of AI of various leaders from Data Camp, is, the general piece that we're talking about here today is just lack of expertise, really not understanding how to utilize this. This cost thing, let me tell you, is a huge gotcha. There's so many companies out
Yeah.
there, and I saw one of the chats like, how do you even know how many tokens you use?
Right.
Guess what? People in the IT team don't even understand how many tokens their company is using because the way that it is calculated within, an open AI instance of ChatGPT or what you're using in Copilot or what you're using in Gemini, it's only visible to the IT team,
Yeah.
frankly. it's not visible to the individual departments. And even they have to use a special calculator that these vendors give them to be able to understand, well, if I'm doing, 25 agent calls, how much does that cost me? Well, goes into a whole metric. You almost need a PhD to figure out these token usage. And
Yeah.
that's a very crazy part of it. So this is like what some of them are discussing as far as the metrics. But let's talk about this here, which is
Yeah.
the core of this is, the difference between AI training and AI capabilities, because I think many of us are kind of stuck, in this area of, we're offering trainings. Sometimes those trainings can be online courses. This, maybe you bring in a facilitator, great. But like, what are you really doing to provide that continual training to, because it doesn't always equal training equals capabilities. There has to be some things that are coming together. And again, these are some of the statistics here of what's happening inside organizations. But I'm going to stop sharing and allow Lindsay and Mindy, whoever wants to go first, to chat about, this topic of literacy and trainings to then make somebody more capable. How does that kind of happen inside organizations, and what can we do?
Do
I
you,
don't know, Mindy, if you want to
you
go
want me to
first.
start or?
Sure, go
I,
ahead. Yeah.
well, in our experience, often it's like first about really in a safe, anonymous way, understanding, first of all, where is the level of literacy within our organization? And so even having an anonymous survey for people to speak into that is really helpful because I often feel that when we talk with HR leaders, they may have a sense of where it is, but it is often the truth is very different from what they may feel. They may feel often it's interesting. Most of them feel that they're more sophisticated. They feel that most of the team is further along than they actually are. And so that survey is often a really good baseline to understand that current state and to really get to where are the gaps of how people are or are not currently utilizing, as well as how are they feeling about it and where might there be some blockers and questions so that we can start to have a shared conversation around that it's informed with some data points. Um, and I think that it is often, Beth, the way I find that starting with that survey is the best place to start so that we can meet them where they're at versus taking a generic class here or there
Right. Hmm.
to really then start where the team is at.
So capabilities are gained by some of the trainings where you know where people are at, so you can start to build on
Yeah.
those levels of knowledge and information sharing in a way that hopefully is collaborative. And like you said, in a space where people can ask questions and not feel dumb, right?
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
what about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree with everything Mindy said. I think that, from my perspective, the tools are very generic at this point for the most part. Now, I think if you're in a very specific technical type role, that might not be the case. But I think for the general population, tools feel generic. I'm not really sure how I'm going to use this for my specific role. How do I enable and unlock efficiencies and things that will help me do my job better, insights? Oftentimes, I think we are reliant on who's implementing and building the tool, so to speak, right? So we need clear, better partnerships with our technology teams, the ones that are buying the technology, implementing it, turning it on, making sure that they're doing it in a way that makes sense for the people that are using it. I think that's one piece, and I'm sure that's happening. I don't know that that's happening, strongly across the board. I put a link into the chat as well for an article that I found from Gartner. So Gartner did a study and what they found is that we have a lot of companies that are cutting roles before the systems are ready.
Mhm.
And what they're finding is that people are hiring employees back because they pulled the trigger a little too soon,
Mhm.
right? And so it's a really interesting study and article. Encourage everybody to go read it. But I think what I pull from this is we're making decisions that impact people that also may end up impacting our brand and things later down the line when our system isn't ready for it. And so I
Yeah.
think when we look at the tools that we're implementing, we also have to look at our internal systems and make sure that the tools are the right ones to enable the work that we need people to do. And to say, hey, well, we're a co-pilot shop and that's what we're using. Great, but that may not actually be the tool that your employees need to do their best work. And to Mindy's point, as these tools continue to develop, there's some very cool newer tools out there that a lot of us are starting to play with. Do we have the adaptability within our organizations to adopt multiple tools, or are we, I kind of think of it like our HRIS systems, right? We bought these HRIS systems and we dumped millions of dollars into them, and now like that's it. Whether it works or not, we're using it because that's what we decided on. And I think in the world of AI, we have to have a much more agile way
Hmm.
of looking at the tools that we're implementing and using because it's just not going to be static in this new world that we're in. We've got to have a variety of options available to us to do the best work.
Oh yeah, I love that, Lindsay, because with the baseline of the survey of just like where are individuals at, but then it's about bringing together and even thinking, okay, where is our team at? Like, and with the technology that we're using, where is it? How do we get work done as a
Yeah.
team? And then where are those cross-functional dependencies? And being able to look at that and do we even have a consistent way of processing how we work? Because often there may be three people with the same title and they're getting their job done in three very different ways.
Hmm.
And so even like then that's like another layer, like kind of as we like kind of survey, we understand where people are at, we're understanding where the capability gaps are. Then it's also at the same time having conversation of how do we get work done? How
Yeah.
are we not using tools to get that done? What might be one thing, one place that we could start to play and think about what do we have today or what don't we have that we want to experiment with that we can do in a safe way that aligns with the governance of the company if they've set that and be able to iterate, right, and break it down in an agile way. Okay, we're going to do this one thing that will give us signal because what we know is that we don't know. The one thing we know is we don't know, and to know we have to learn and we have to experiment and hypothesize and think about this in a scientific method approach. If I do
Hmm.
this, I anticipate this. Is that true or not? What did we learn from doing this? Okay, what do we try next? Maybe there's even better tool. Because Lindsay, you're so right. Like Beth and I, every day there's a new tool. And then we're like, okay, well, what is the differences? What is Gemini better at than Claude? And what is Claude uniquely better at than ChatGPT? And there is a difference. They're not all good at all the same things. They are
Right.
uniquely designed to process certain types of data and information differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, really great questions, Lindsay.
And I think communication, someone in the chat had written, a couple of things around just using, AI plus humans, but also kind of looking at our KPIs and how we're measuring things, and I think it's really important as we start to build out what does this look like for us collectively and then also organizationally? Are we going to the point of impact? So when you talk about how our team's using it, are we including those teams in the decision-making process? Are we bringing them in to say, how does this work for you? Can you try this against this process or this way of working? And does this tool work or not work for you? Can the team help build the strategy? Because I think the more you can bring folks along and include them in the conversation and the decision making about how this is going to impact them, I think the more buy-in you're going to get from people.
Mhm.
And honestly, less fear because they
Yep.
know the conversations that are happening. They can be part of the decision making. So I think all of this is very, circular in terms of, I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg here, but I think it's all part of how we're going
Yes.
to unlock and enable the workforce to do the things we want people to do as they use these new tools and new technology.
Yes, and to Sarah's point, that survey is so important to start the conversation, to get the baseline understanding, because you're right, you do need to have the foundation. We can't assume that everyone knows. And so, how
Mhm.
do we level set and create a starting point of we all are going to get the same training, that foundational training to know about AI and what AI is, that we can then all go from there to then. So we often do think about how do we start at a generic foundational level before we go and look at the function or the team and get more specific and hone in.
Wow, you guys have brought up a lot of really great points. No, these I was just listening in, and it is a very circular thing, and the chicken and the egg and the horse and the cart, all the different expressions you can have. But it's, I think we all agree that you have to have a foundation of literacy. And one of the things I wanted to share was, again, another slide about, this concept of I have seen so many companies where the board, boards often run companies in the background, and they're saying to their CEOs, go do AI. And when that comment comes over to a CEO to go do AI, they look at their leadership team and say, what is that? What do we do to do AI? And some of the simple things that people chose to do is flip a switch and turn on Microsoft Copilot or
Hmm.
Gemini and not provide any training, but just say, okay, employees, here you go. You've got something. Now go learn it yourself. And that's that literacy is being outsourced to employees.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be doing it in their own time or at work. It's really not clear. And, I think the people I talk to that are the most advanced learners are doing it on the weekends on their own time, right?
Yeah.
Because they've never been given any expectations of having certain time set aside to play and learn some of these AI tools. Or best yet, what we do at MeBeBot is we have a Friday session where we call it show and learn, where each of us shows something cool we have learned how to do in one of the AI tools as a way to kind of bring it together so we're not all learning in our own little bubble. I mean, I kind of worry, and I'm going to put this out here because I think it's a weird topic in a way, but do people feel so scared of their jobs that they are hoarding their AI knowledge that they're learning on their own just to make sure they have job security? I mean, it's kind of controversial, but I mean, I feel like I see that happening with
Hmm.
inside organizations. Like someone becomes an expert and they're not willing to share and teach other people on their team what to do. And that's really a culture thing, right? That's a culture that needs to be broken apart so that we all learn how to do it more as a group. And to the point of like, well, what are people doing that is helping build that literacy and helping get people from literacy to capable to then rolling into strategies that have outcomes we can measure, right? Because it is a bit of a circular loop of what has to come, frankly, in certain steps to do it right. And a lot of it, is rethinking and unlearning, right? And so you have to unlearn what your role is today is not probably going to be your role in the future. So how do you unlearn some of your traditional behavior patterns of what you do in your role and start to really think creatively about, well, how could this be completely different and re-engineered or restructured or reprocessed, under a different light of what we have today, right? And none of that can happen unless you really have that literacy, angle first. So I've got this slide up here. I'm going to keep it up here right now and allow Mindy and Lindsay to share their thoughts on some of the things that maybe they've seen companies do incorrectly and what they've done well, where they actually come out moving forward faster because of it. Mindy, would you like to go first? Whoop, I think you're on mute.
My dogs are barking, so I put myself on mute.
Okay.
Um, I, I feel like we've kind of been honing in on some of these things, and I love how the slide so clearly articulates summarizes what we've been speaking to. I think when it's done well, right, Beth, it's around understanding first of all the governance. Like, how do I create a safe playground and being able to clarify what is that playground and how employees can safely play within it. Um, and also being clear on, we may not know how to measure the outcomes yet. But even saying knowing that and helping people understand we're going to be figuring this out. And as we get clearer and understanding what the AI strategy is, as we co-design that with you, then we will start to hone in on measures that make sense. um, I think that transparency of conversation, like how Lindsay talked about co-designing, co-creating, and then being able to, foundationally create that literacy, so that people can then go and think about how do I get my work done today? How I can like turn on my, if I don't, because we get in the habit of doing things every day. We often see that you have people do this and then they go solve these big problems when it's really like, how about you think about what do I just do consistently every day manually and start there? And just start there as the one small thing. And so I often will even say, turn on your Zoom or and share your screen and walk through verbally your process, and then get the transcript and then use the approved technology to, prompt Claude or Chat GPT or Gemini or Copilot to help be your AI solution expert, and think through like, yeah, what might I try out first? How am I, what is a consistent process every day? Look at the transcript. We love Prompt Cowboy at MeBeBot. It helps us write better prompts and learn how to write better prompts. I think that's the other thing too, right? Is that we don't want to learn the learning, and we don't want to rely on the AI to be doing it. We need to understand how the AI is coming up with the outcomes, and being able to then be able to test and confirm, because these things that we put in place don't just then run on their own. I think it's also, when this is done really well, Beth, here, it's also because we understand what we created, then we're able to test and continue to teach what we've built within AI, and train it and continue to test it and maintain, because then we become that human governance over the AI solutions. So I think that's where I see teams being successful, because sometimes we do see, and I don't know if we have that on this list, that if they do create something, it's like the projects that we create. Okay, done, checklist. It's just going to run on its own. No, we
Yes, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mindy. You brought up a number of good points, but I think it sort of falls under the, audit
Yeah, I think
trails
it
or
gets
just
hidden under
having a
there
bit
though.
hidden
Yeah.
under there. You're right. It's more of that, this isn't a one and done type of
Yeah.
thing. It is a continuous training and learning and really observing how the AI works so that you can, frankly, grow and make it better over time.
Yeah.
But you brought up a number of good points. I love record a session of something you do that isn't working well and take the transcript and ask AI for help to make it better. So that's fabulous. Lindsay, how about yourself?
I mean, looking at this list, I think it resonates a lot with me in terms of the how most do it versus the top 35%. I love the idea of picking some very impactful workflows first and trying things out there. And or maybe they're not, I don't know, maybe they're not super impactful because you don't want to practice on things that might make or break things in your business. But I also am listening to you guys talk about process and governance. I think some of that also is company culture because I've worked for organizations that had very, very strong, what I would consider process and systems in place. I've worked for other companies that are a little more loose with that type of stuff, right? And so a lot of what we're trying to build, you have to build it on a strong foundation of process and data, the data that's in your current, whatever it is you use, right? And so if it's sloppy, if it's not good, if it's not clean, you're going to have a really hard time leveraging the tools and trusting the output of the tools that you have. So, some of this is current infrastructure cleanup and going back to how did we build this? How did we get here? What are we using? The other piece is the new build, right? It's the new tools and the new things that's being built on top of what we already have. So it's a lot of work. And what resonated with me, and as both of you were talking, was employees feeling just there's a lot. We have BAU going on. Like we have our day-to-day work. We have things that can't business doesn't stop because we're trying to adopt AI, right? So we have all this work that we need to do, plus we're learning. And I think Joel had put in here this concept of cognitive surrender, right? So this whole concept of like change management, learning something new, what our brains have to do to learn all of this new stuff. It's not overnight. Unlocking tools that companies have at their disposal, like tuition assistance, maybe beefing that up a little bit so that employees can go get some trainings and certificates and some things outside of work. Are we incentivizing people to learn this? What are we doing through KPIs? What are we doing through, the discussions of where your job is going, career development, skill development? I think those are all things that have to go alongside the tools. We can't throw tools at people and say, use AI. This is how it is now, right? And so, as we think about this joint ownership between HR, IT, and the business, I think this is where, just because my professional background is on the people side of things, I think this is where the people teams have an opportunity to really lean in and shine and really coming alongside the businesses and helping to enable and stand this up for the employee population. I actually think if we could reframe it, this could be a really exciting time for people. If we could get through some of the fear and frustration and really take a step back and think about this for what it is, which is we're changing the entire way that the world operates and works. And we get to be a part of that and shaping that. And that mindset reframe, I think, could do a lot to help people unlock where they need to go with their learnings and their usage of the tools. Um, but again, we have to know from the company, like, what is your strategy? Where are we going? Where are we headed with this? And so there has to be clarity there so that employees know how to spend their time properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is one of these things that it's overwhelming. There's so much to do. We've got to train people. We've got to keep them naturally curious. We have to incentivize them. We have to build, project plans to understand things that we can do differently. And then we have to build an overall company strategy of how AI, is going to be used across the business for both the customer facing and internal facing work. So it's a lot, and there's no reason, no wonder everyone is overwhelmed right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
right? I mean, when you just think of it in that way, but I mean, it almost starts over here, even though we have this how to reevaluate your AI literacy plan, doesn't it kind of
Yeah.
start with talking honestly
Hmm.
with people about like, we don't have all the answers. This thing came out of thin air. I mean, we've been working in AI for 8 years now in the era of natural language processing and machine learning and evolving into leveraging a lot of generative AI. But I can tell you almost everyone I know who has been very experienced in AI for many years, pre-generative AI, never really saw it coming as fast as it did. And I think a lot of it came to having the processing power of companies like NVIDIA being able to have the chip capacity that really powered the computers to really perform the necessary algorithm data steps that created these large language models, right? And so we all were caught off by surprise. But it's a matter of like saying, hey, we don't have all the answers. I may not even know what your role could be. However, let's go down this path together. The sooner we learn how to use AI and understand the governance and get everyone better trained and ideally more of a team capacity, and then we can start to get it into the workflows. But I'm going to take this slide down because I really want to see faces here, but I'd love to, for Lindsay and Mindy to discuss like, is there opportunity right now where, we've been going down this path for over, a couple years now for many companies to kind of stop and really put some different types of structure in place so that the outcomes aren't the 96% of all MIT report of 96% of AI pilots failed,
Hmm.
based on what, right? That was a stat that came out a little while ago. But is there an opportunity to do things differently now? And how do you feel about, the flow of the rethinking the AI literacy? Mindy, I'm
Well, I mean,
looking at you.
I agree with the honest conversations happening first. Yeah, I think that the dialogue is important, and that's like a cultural thing too, right? Like, how are conversations happening in our organization? A lot of, I think we do need to think about it from, a cultural ecosystem perspective. I think, and I do like the progression of starting with the governance because people need to understand, okay, well, how can I safe? What is the container within which I can safely play and safely have these conversations? Because if we don't have an environment in which people can actually have dialogue, um, they're not going to speak honestly. And so
Yes, and
even
just
just
as yeah, as a little poll question, I mean, I'm curious, many of you have been active on the chat. How many of you feel like you have a open learning environment in your company where you feel safe to play and voice concerns and learn together? Put a thumbs up if that's at your culture.
because I think that is also something that, we as HR, the function can really help be able to, understand and really, get curious about and, understand what are the root cause indicators that are underneath that. Because that may be something that we need to start addressing. Because if honesty comes first and the conversation and dialogue are important, how are we building the environment for that to happen? And I think that's often missed because we're moving so quick. Um, and the human aspect is so important, is one of the things that kept coming up in running remote, was about that human element and the connection and the care of us being able to say, hey, hey, human, I see you. And it's not just about what you're doing or how you're doing it, but it is about who you are and who are you in this. Um, I also think that in that conversation, I love that Joel, I just wanted to reflect on his comment here too, because I think that there is an aspect around forecasting AI cost that is also, very unclear. And, how are we doing that? I don't often hear people talk about that because of the difficulties you mentioned, Beth, in calculating that. So even like being able to lean into that with our finance teams, which you so often talk about that cross-functional. This is something that we so need to have a cross-functional conversation around. Um, so anyways, I could keep talking, but I'll stop.
No, that's great, Mindy. Thank you. And Lindsay?
Yeah, I just want to say I just saw Sarah's comment about having an AI champions program, and it allows employees to experiment, which I think is really awesome. I know there's a lot of things that employers are trying to do, right, to just get buy-in and adoption. But again, I just want to go back to, I think we need to talk more about what it is that this is going to look like in the future. I think that honesty piece of we may not actually be looking at less jobs, but we're going to be looking at different jobs. We're going to be looking at different ways of working. And so the conversation should be with our employees. What is it that is going to change about the way you work, how you think? And that I think can drive people to then understand how do they need to go learn, how do they need to change and adapt. But, all of this, I don't want to get too philosophical, but this is such an experiment on change management and leadership. And that change curve that you always see about how people adopt new things. And we're in a real life experiment of how this is all gonna happen. But it is true. I think if we don't start embracing what's coming, we will find ourselves a bit left behind. Um, and so I would encourage people to think about how they personally are managing and adopting the tools and the capabilities, but then also being bold enough to go to your organizations and ask the questions. How does this impact my role? How should I be thinking about my job differently? And that can feel scary. And I think that, again, just what we're seeing around us with the job market and things, it does impact people and it makes them feel more fearful. Or I'm just going to keep quiet because I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to say anything. Beth, you had mentioned a question earlier. Are people kind of hoarding information from a job security perspective? And I have no proof of that. I would assume probably to some degree, right? Because it's just we're in this unknown place. But I've also just contacted so many colleagues and net people I know through my network, and people are so willing to share and share what they've learned. So I think a piece of this is just letting the fear go and start reaching out to your network and your peers and people you know, people you trust. Start having conversations. Hey, what are you using? What are you using? How do you think I could use this in my role? If there's a tool that you find, go take that to your organization and say, I've been using this. Can we use this tool? This has been really helpful for me in these ways. I think we have to stop being in the victim place of like, oh, this is happening to me, and change our mindset to, I have a chance to help shape how this is happening and how this is impacting my role. Now, I'm not trying to be like two rose-colored glasses and say, well, then that's going to, keep you from being impacted from anything that's going on. But at least you're in the driver's seat. At least you're someone who's like, I feel like I can have a little control over what I'm learning and what I'm doing versus waiting until something happens to me. And so I do think it's a bit of that mindset shift to help people feel like they have some level of control over, what's happening in their own personal world.
Yeah, that mindset shift is huge. Stay and
For
staying in
sure. For
and
sure.
staying in that possibility and an abundance mindset. And like, what is just one thing that we can control? What's one thing we could start doing differently? And that's the one thing that we can start doing is how we feel.
Mm.
And how
Mental
are we
perspective.
responding to how we
Yeah.
feel and the behaviors. um and I do love, like, because we do see in some of the places that we work that within the mindsets of leaders, if they are in a less than space, they often don't speak up. They often don't they stop having a voice about who's making the decisions around the budget and the technology stack, and they stop advocating for themselves because they feel like it's happening to them. So why would they try? And so that advocacy and that agency is also, dependent on, us too.
Hmm.
And how we are kind of leaning in and, understanding, what can I do? What can I do differently here? And, what door have I not knocked on yet?
I love that. And cross-functional relationships mean
Yes,
so
huge.
much during the time of AI. I know great conversation with Mindy and Lindsay. I'd love to open it up to having people who've been on mute, but yet active in the chat.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear, other perspectives or, are there things that you still have questions about or what may have resonated well, but is anyone kind of brave enough to expand upon some of the items that you all have put into the chat today?
I'll just comment on one of the last comments that I made. I think AI is just one piece of the change too. And I think that a lot of us are so fixated on how AI is going to impact and change how we're working. But I also think that it's going to change a lot of the systems for how we operate and how we work. And we need to think about those too.
Hmm.
Because I think there's so many changes that are coming, and so I think we need to be mindful and strategic about those pieces as well.
How do you manage all the different changes that will be happening? Like, do you have a prioritization type system internally, or because I'm sure people are throwing things out there like we got to think about this, we got to think about this, but how do you get a sense of order around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I can only speak to that from the perspective of our team, which is really just driving changes within distributed work itself. But I think that's a combination of looking at feedback from employees to say, where are the biggest challenges, and then balancing that with where leaders are seeing challenges, where HRBPs are seeing challenges, and then really prioritizing based on those needs that we're seeing. And I think that our team takes a research-driven approach to then identifying, what are those problems that we're seeing and which ones actually do have the biggest impact. And I think that's been the biggest struggle is it's really easy to listen to the loudest leader or the loudest person in the room saying this is what the problem is. But then once you're actually able to put research and data behind it, to say, actually, this is a totally different problem from what we thought it was originally. And, this is the actual problem we need to go after. I
Mm.
think that has really helped us to change the narrative around let's just go after everything that's changing. And I think then it's about, working intentionally with our comms team to figure out holistically across the company, what are some of the other big changes that are coming? Because we're just one tiny piece of the team in the grand scheme of things. And so how do we prioritize against, the big business changes that are coming, financial changes that are coming, mergers and acquisitions. And so it's really just again coming back to that intentionality of figuring out, the true scope of something and the true impact, and then solving from there and prioritizing from there.
That's awesome. I mean, you have a really good handle of your
Hmm.
organization, Sarah. So bravo.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
Cameron? Oh, sorry.
okay.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's almost resonating for me in this conversation is almost just the thought about patience when it comes to the human aspect of all of this, because at least in our organization, I think there are quite a few people that saw AI equals efficiency, but also how much that has impacted, like it's inversely impacted sometimes productivity because people think, well, we can just move faster because that's how quickly AI is moving. And as long as you can just prompt an LLM, we're like A-OK. But we've really tried to slow ourselves down by having more internal working groups and expanding that with time, especially for maybe some of our newer staff. And honestly, even staff have been around for a while, but we just like I feel like sometimes it's like these things move so quickly, we don't stop ourselves enough, and changes come so quickly. But for us, it's like just because we're efficient doesn't mean we are saying for ourselves like on the productive side of things, because honestly, we could be creating more mistakes if we're being too concerned with just like we can get out our next action item within an hour. It's like that's not going to be necessarily useful for us long term, especially if you're not really thinking through what you're doing.
Cameron, that's super interesting. And just to chime in quickly, I was telling you, I just came from another AI call right before this, another industry talk. And the big theme of that one was pausing to prioritize productivity. And so the key theme of that was everybody's trying to use AI in silos, even within their own
Hmm.
teams, to solve for things that might move the needle or might make things a few seconds faster or a few minutes faster, but that we need to start being intentional about what we're prioritizing on each team and pausing and looking at all of our overall processes. And from there, deciding what we want to go after and picking maybe one or two or three things versus having everybody do that separately.
Yes, I love that. I mean, that's one of the questions is this priorities, right? Because that's one
Yeah.
of the main things is just all these competing priorities. Well, we have 1 minute left. Is there anyone who wants to share any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
I was just going to say, Beth, like one of the things that they don't have a way, I mean, Sarah and Cameron, I love that they're just literally, how do we create the right dialogue to prioritize to get to the root cause? Because there's so many different dimensions impacted within the ecosystem of work when we think about any change. And so even like the Clarity AI framework, I think is super powerful to help people even reflect on all those different dimensions, right? And think about like, if we're going to spend time, how do we think through that and be able to, not just get seconds, but true like impact, and really reflect and have a good dialogue on that in a more holistic way.
Absolutely. So that's been dropped into the chat, and we created this framework back in March, and the on-demand version of that roundtable is available on our MeBeBot website. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. We're at time. A big thanks to Mindy Honkoop and Lindsay Howell for joining today. It was awesome to get you all into this conversation, and hopefully the folks that joined today live gained some good insights. I know we learned from you all too. So sharing your insights as part of the chat, part of the verbal conversation at the end, super helpful. So we're in this together. Watch our website. We are going to be doing additional sessions throughout the summer. Well, fabulous, everybody. Thanks again for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thank you
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.